Welcome to her remarkable history. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The disgusting abuse of Lady Jane Grey, the 9-day Queen. One of the saddest figures of the Tudor period was Lady Jane Grey. Following the death of King Edward VI, she was placed onto the throne despite not wishing to become queen. The manipulations of her father-in-law and other prominent Protestants secured her a place on the crown, and she is remembered today as the shortest reigning monarch in English history. Jane ruled for just 9 days before she was overthrown by Mary I, or Bloody Mary. But Lady Jane was considered one of the most educated girls of the Tudor period and the world at the time. But tragically she was beheaded and executed inside of the Tower of London. But Jane's school life and early life was not happy, and there have been allegations that have emerged about abuse that she faced as a young girl. It is clear that her parents may have wanted her to become one of the classiest and most educated ladies of her time, but this drive came at a cost. Lady Jane Grey lived inside of Bradgate House in Leicestershire, and in August of 1550, Frances Grey, her mother, went hunting, and she left Jane at home to receive a visitor. During this visit from Roger Ascham, he would write later about the conversations he had with Lady Jane. He said, "Before I went into Germany, I came to Bradgate in Leicestershire to take my leave of that noble Lady Jane Grey, to whom I was exceeding much beholding. Her parents, the Duke and Duchess, with all the household gentlemen and gentlewomen, were hunting in the park. I found her in her chamber, reading Phaedo Platonis in Greek, and that was as much delight as a gentleman would read a merry tale of Biaccio. After salutation and duty done, with some other talk, I asked her why she would lease so much pastime in the park. Smiling, she answered me, 'I wist all their sport in the park is but a shadow to that pleasure I find in Plato.' Alas, good folk, they never felt what true pleasure meant. 'And how come you, madam,' quoth I, 'to this deep knowledge of pleasure, and what did chiefly allure you unto it, seeing not many women, but very few men have attained thereunto?' 'I will tell you,' quoth she, 'and tell you a truth, which perchance ye will marvel at. One of the greatest benefits that ever God gave me is that he sent me so sharp and severe parents, and so gentle a schoolmaster. For when I am in presence either of father or mother, whether I speak, keep silent, sit, stand, or go eat, drink, be merry or sad, be sewing, playing, dancing, or doing anything else, I must do it, as it were, in such weight, measure, and number, even so perfectly as God made the world, or else I am so sharply taunted, so cruelly threatened, yea, presently sometimes with pinches, nips, and bobs, and other ways, which I will not name for the honour I bear them, so without measure misordered that I think myself in hell, till time come that I must go to Mr. Elmer, who teacheth me so gently, so pleasantly, with such fair allurements to learning, that I think all the time nothing whiles I am with him. And when I am called from him, I fall on weeping, because whatsoever I do else but learning is full of grief, trouble, fear, and whole misliking unto me. And thus my book hath been so much my pleasure, and bringeth daily to me more pleasures and more, than in respect of all of it, all other pleasures, in very deed, be but trifles and troubles unto me.' I remember this talk gladly, both because it's so worthy of memory, and because also it was the last talk that I ever had, and the last time that I ever saw that noble and worthy lady." Now, there is in particular one part of Ascham's account that alludes to Jane being forced into submission by her mother and father. It's the quote, "One of the greatest benefits that God gave me is that he sent me so sharp and severe parents and so gentle a schoolmaster." This means that Jane's parents were rather brutal and cold towards her, driving her forwards, and also Ascham recalls also about Jane's possible abuse. She says that if she does not do things perfectly and to her parents' ability, then she is taunted and so cruelly threatened with pinches, nips, and bobs, and other ways. This means that Jane may have been threatened with violence or physical actions by her parents. Ascham was struck by the intelligence of Jane, and he later wrote, "This last summer I turned out my road to Leicester, where Jane Grey was living with her father. I was immediately admitted to her chamber, and found the noble damsel so thoroughly understanding that it caused my great astonishment. With this later writing, it's clear Roger Ascham may not have been shocked by the abuse Jane told him of. He would later write to Jane personally on the 18th of January 1551, and he said, "In this long travel of mine, I have passed over wide tracts of country and seen the largest cities. I have studied the customs, institutes, laws, and religions of many men and diverse nations, with as much diligence as I was able. But in all the variety of subjects, nothing has caused me in so much wonder as my having fallen upon you last summer, a maiden of noble birth, and that too in the absence of your tutor, in the hall of your most noble family, and at a time when others, both men and women, give themselves up to hunting and pleasure, you, a divine noble, reading carefully in Greek, Phaedo, of the divine Plato, and happier in being so occupied than because you derive your birth, both on your father's side and on your mother's, from kings and queens. Go on then, most accomplished maiden, to bring honour on your country, happiness on your parents, glory to yourself, credit to your tutor, congratulation to all your friends, and the greatest admiration to all strangers." With this, Roger Ascham was clearly moved by Jane and her skills, and he commended her parents for their work with her, disregarding the possible violence exhibited by her parents. But why was the threat prominent? At the time, Jane was provided the classiest education of Tudor England, and it was her parents who were paying for it. They were motivated to make their daughter as attractive a marriage partner as possible to secure the family for years to come. They would not like Jane to spend her time hunting and doing other things that weren't related to education or learning. Jane complained freely about her parents, and it's possible that she was scared of them. A different look at her parents could lead us to reaching the conclusion that her father in particular took great pride in his daughter's intellectual accomplishments. Jane wrote in the July of 1551 to church reformer Henry Bullinger in Zurich, and she was in correspondence with other high-profile people. As time went on, it's clear that people were recommending that Jane should become more attractive as a proposition for men to marry, and some may have also foreseen her role in society. One person wrote that, "It now remains for me to request that, with the kindness we have so long experienced, you will instruct my pupil in your next letter as to what embellishment and adornment of person is becoming in the young woman professing godliness." In treating upon this subject, you may bring forward the examples of our King's sister, the Princess Elizabeth, who goes clad in every respect as becoming a young maiden, and yet no one is included by the example of so illustrious a lady, and in so much gospel light, to lay aside, much less look down upon, gold, jewels, and braidlings of hair. They hear preachers declaim against these things, but yet no one amends her life. Moreover, I wish you would prescribe to her the length of time she may properly devote to the study of music. For in this respect also people are beyond measure in this country, while their whole labour is undertaken and exertions made for the sake of ostentation. If you will handle these points at some length, there will probably, through your influence, be some occasion to the ranks of virtue. With this, Jane was even compared to her cousin Elizabeth, being compared with a princess and the daughter of Henry VIII, such was her standing. But was Lady Jane Grey an abused girl? The difficult thing to establish is the intent that her parents had. It's clear that they wanted her to become the most attractive marriage proposition in the land, especially with her links to the royal family. But this was no excuse. It's also interesting to consider what Jane said about her parents. She may have just been moaning about her parents' high expectations, or the fact she was forced into devoting time to education when she'd rather be out doing more exciting activities than reading and translating. In the approach in which people consider Jane an abused girl, her mother is portrayed as a wicked, powerful and cruel lady. Jane would later refuse to blame her parents for her plight, when she was held as a prisoner in the Tower of London following her overthrow by Mary I. In this she is portrayed as a mother's girl, but Frances, her mother, would later fail to plead with Bloody Mary I for her daughter Jane's life. Following the execution of her daughter and her husband, Frances Grey would quickly remarry, but to consider whether Lady Jane Grey was mistreated as a girl would need further research and also access to more writings from her which currently cannot be found and are lost to history. But what is certain is that Lady Jane Grey is seen as one of the most tragic figures in the Tudor period, who met her end at the sharp blade of an axe inside the Tower of London. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.